The silence at Old Trafford was suffocating. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of betrayal. The kind that echoes louder than any cheer. In that moment, Marcus Rashford wasn't a hero or a prodigy or the poster boy of Manchester United. He was just another name, another number, walking away from the only life he had ever known. This was the boy from Wythenshawe, raised in the shadow of the Theatre of Dreams. The boy who grew up idolizing the badge, who carried the weight of a city on his shoulders before he was even 20. He had been United's golden child, their academy gem, the embodiment of hope. And now, he was an outcast, cast aside by the very place that had made him. But this isn't the story of an ending. No, this is the story of resurrection. September 2025, Barcelona. The Camp Nou trembles under the weight of 90,000 voices. A cauldron of Catalan passion, chanting a name they once doubted but now adored. Rashford. It was unthinkable only months earlier. The same player United deemed finished, surplus, expendable, now reinvented, reborn, orchestrating magic beneath the Spanish sun. Every touch electric, every sprint a reminder that he was not done, not broken, not forgotten. This is more than football. This is about rejection and redemption, about the crushing weight of expectation and the rare courage it takes to rise from the ashes. What you're about to witness is the rebirth of Marcus Rashford. How a career left for dead was resurrected in 6 relentless months. How Barcelona didn't just sign a footballer, they saved a soul. The story begins where all great footballing tragedies do, with promise. February 2016. A teenager named Marcus Rashford was thrust into Manchester United's starting 11 at the very last minute. Marshall injured in warm-up. 13 first-team players unavailable. Louis van Gaal had no choice but to trust a kid who'd barely finished his homework. 2 goals on debut against FC Midtjylland. The footballing world stopped and stared. This wasn't just talent. This was something supernatural. 3 days later, Arsenal arrived at Old Trafford thinking they'd face a one-hit wonder. They left humiliated. 2 more goals, 1 assist. Marcus Rashford had announced himself to the Premier League in the most spectacular fashion possible. But here's what nobody talks about. That debut wasn't luck. Rashford had been training with United's first team since he was 16. David Moyes had already spotted something special. The Guardian had listed him as United's best prospect in their 2014 Next Generation feature. This was a generational talent hiding in plain sight. The Manchester Derby came next. City versus United. Blue against red. An 18-year-old boy against the might of Manchester City's defense. The result? A thunderbolt into the top corner. The only goal of the match. The youngest scorer in the fixture's Premier League history. By season's end, Rashford had won the FA Cup, broken George Best's European scoring record, and signed a new contract. 8 goals in 18 games as a teenager. The world was at his feet. But football has a cruel way of testing the chosen ones. What happened next was years of chaos. Managers came and went. Systems changed monthly. Alexis Sanchez arrived on astronomical wages, supposedly to replace him. Yet Rashford endured. He adapted. He survived. Under Jose Mourinho, he was handed the iconic number 10 shirt, the same number worn by Rooney, Van Nistelrooy, and Sheringham. The pressure was immense, but Rashford thrived under it. Then came that night in Paris. March 6, 2019. Champions League round of 16. United were 2-0 down from the first leg against Paris Saint-Germain. Everyone had written them off. Everyone except Marcus Rashford. He assisted 1 goal. Then, in the dying moments, stepped up to take a penalty that would either send United through or crush their European dreams. His first competitive penalty ever. The pressure was unimaginable. He smashed it into the net. At just 21, Rashford had outplayed Kylian Mbappe on the biggest stage in European football. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was a phenomenon. But here's where our story takes a devastating turn. Fast forward to 2022. The same Marcus Rashford who once terrorized Europe's elite was struggling to get into United's starting 11. 2 goals all season under Ralph Rangnick. Dropped for the final games. The whispers began. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. The decline seemed terminal. A player who once scored 30 goals in a season was now a shadow of his former self. The boyhood club that raised him had seemingly forgotten how to use it. But in football, redemption often comes when you least expect it. Enter Ruben Amorim, January 2025. The Portuguese coach who was meant to be United savior. Instead, he became Rashford's executioner. Behind-the-scenes reports suggested Amorim questioned Rashford's work ethic, his commitment, his desire. The rules were the same for everybody, Amorim claimed. But for a player who'd given everything to United for nearly a decade, those rules felt like a betrayal. January transfer window, 2025. Aston Villa knocked on the door. Unai Emery saw something that others had missed. In 17 appearances under the Spanish master, Rashford began to rediscover his spark. For goals, 5 assists. The talent was still there, buried beneath years of mismanagement and broken promises. But Villa wasn't his destination. It was merely a stepping stone. Barcelona had been watching, quietly, patiently. Hansi Flick, the German tactician who transformed Bayern Munich in Germany, saw in Rashford exactly what Emery had seen, a diamond waiting to be polished. July 23, 2025, the announcement sent shockwaves through football. Marcus Rashford, the Manchester United reject, was joining FC Barcelona on €30 million for a permanent option. The critics laughed. Another expensive mistake by Barcelona, they said. A washed-up player looking for one last payday. They couldn't have been more wrong. Barcelona training ground, July 2025. Rashford arrives in Catalonia carrying more than just his kit bag. He's carrying the weight of years of disappointment, criticism, and doubt. But something magical happens when broken players meet the right coach at the right time. Flick saw it immediately. In Rashford's first training session, the German pulled him aside. Forget everything that happened before. He whispered, "Here, you start fresh. Here, you remember why you fell in love with football." The transformation was immediate. In preseason friendlies, Rashford looked reborn. The pace that once terrorized Premier League defenses was back. The clinical finishing that made him a household name had returned. But more importantly, the joy was back. I was clear on my preference from the beginning. Rashford revealed later. Actually, for maybe January. It didn't work out in January, so I went to Villa and enjoyed a good period there. But Barcelona was always the dream. The dream became reality on match day, one of the 2025-26 Champions League. Newcastle United, the same team Rashford had tormented throughout his career, visited Barcelona. 11 goals in 16 previous appearances against them suggested this might be special. It was better than special. It was poetry. First goal, a towering header, perfectly judged. Rashford rose above his marker and powered the ball into the corner. The fans roared as if to announce his return to the biggest stage. Second goal, pure brilliance. Picking up the ball outside the box, he unleashed a thunderous strike that flew beyond keeper. The stadium gasped before erupting. This was the Rashford of old. Decisive, ruthless, unplanned. On the touchline, Hansi Flick wrapped him in a warm embrace, knowing he'd just witnessed a performance that could define a season. These weren't just goals. They were vindication. They were redemption. They were proof that sometimes all a player needs is someone who believes in them. But the real magic of Rashford's Barcelona revival goes beyond goals and assists. It's about resurrection of spirit. At United, he'd become a player afraid to take risks, afraid to fail. At Barcelona, under Flick's nurturing guidance, he's become fearless again. The numbers tell part of the story: goals, assists, man of the match awards. But the real story is in Rashford's eyes. The spark is back. The hunger has returned. The player who once danced past Manchester City's defense as an 18-year-old is dancing again. Barcelona didn't just sign Marcus Rashford. They saved him. They took a player who'd been written off, discarded, and forgotten, and reminded him, in a world, why he was once considered among Europe's most promising talents. They gave him a stage worthy of his abilities and a coach who understood his potential. In Flick's system, Rashford has found freedom. Freedom to express himself, to take risks, to to play with the joy that once made him special. Whether cutting in from the left wing, drifting into central positions, or linking up with Lewandowski and defender, he's rediscovered his love. The beauty of this story isn't just about individual redemption. It's about what happens when the right player meets the right club at the right moment. Barcelona needed pace, directness, and goals from wide positions. Rashford needed belief, trust, and a system that complemented his strengths. It's a partnership made in heaven. As we speak, reports suggest Barcelona are already planning to trigger that €30 million option to make the move permanent. The club that once seemed impossible to afford is now seen as essential. That's what happens when a player proves he belongs at the highest level. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is what it says about second chances. In a sport that's often ruthless in its judgment, Marcus Rashford's Barcelona chapter proves that it's never too late to rewrite your story. The boy who left Manchester as damaged goods has arrived in Barcelona as a superstar reborn. The player who was told he wasn't good enough for a struggling United team is now thrilling crowds at one of the world's greatest clubs. This is how Barcelona saved Marcus Rashford's career. Not with money, not with promises, but with belief. Belief that beneath the doubt and disappointment lay a player who'd once scored on his Champions League debut, who'd once outshone Mbappe in Paris, who'd once been England's golden boy. Sometimes, salvation comes in the most unexpected places. For Marcus Rashford, it came in the form of a Catalan giant who saw not what he'd become, but what he'd always been capable of being. The resurrection is complete. The redemption is real. And this is just the beginning.